Well, Senator, thank you for making time for us. It's been another tremendous week in Washington. The president fired his Secretary of State. He's now talking about shaking up more of his cabinet and his top advisors. Do you think there's an issue with personnel, or is it policy?
You know, I think it can be both. I know with Secretary Tillerson there were differences in policy, but I think it was also a clash of just style and culture. I mean, you think about the president, he's very entrepreneurial. He just picks up the phone and, makes things happen sometimes. And Secretary Tillerson is, CEO of Exxon. When they do things, if you're going to build a production facility in some place, you plan it out, you think it through. And so I think it wasn't just policy, but it was also very much just in how they went about doing their business. And I think the president became sort of exasperated with just how things were in that regard. But I personally thought Rex Tillerson gave very, very sound advice and obviously was very close to him, talked to him a lot, talked to the president a lot, knew that the relationship was not perfect.
How would you describe the current state of the Trump administration?
You know, it's interesting. I've been pretty frank in my assessment from time to time. There's a lot happening. I mean, we just passed a bill this week in banking, or regarding banking. We had tax reform. There's been a lot of things that have occurred. Foreign policy is moving rapidly, unexpectedly in some cases.
You're talking about the meeting with Kim Jong-un that the president agreed to.
That's right. And look, in fairness, our country led the international community in putting the toughest sanctions ever on North Korea. And I think what you're seeing is a response to that. Hopefully there'll be a good ending here.
What's a good ending?
Well, of course, a good ending is denuclearization, which, there's a lot that goes into that. There'll hopefully be a lot of precursor meetings and a lot to set up a foundation for a very good discussion between the two. But this is something that will take, a period of time to resolve.
You're leaving the Senate, and you've been pretty candid in your past about what you thought of where the president was. You questioned his stability, you questioned his competence. You called the White House, basically a old age home. Do you have a reason now that you're being more careful in your language? Have you fixed your relationship with the president?
Well, look, I don't think people realize that we never stopped talking.
Even during that back and forth?
Maybe there was a 3-week détente, but, I've talked twice to him this week. When you say be more careful, I'm assessing things as they are, and as I just mentioned, there has been a lot of progress made. Sometimes it's a little uncanny as to how it happens, and it's very unorthodox. As I mentioned, the president, just like a lot of business people, just picks up the phone, and sometimes things happen in a good way, sometimes not. But we have made progress in North Korea. There's no question.
Do you think progress is a meeting?
Well, I'm really talking about the things we've done to bring the international community together to put us in a place where discussions can take place. The Iran deal will be another issue that's coming up in May, and right now it doesn't feel like it's going to be extended. I think the president likely will move away from it unless our European counterparts really come together on a framework. And it doesn't feel to me that they are. Now, as we get within 2 weeks of the May 12th date, that could change.
You think the president's going to pull out of that Iran deal on May 12th?
I do. As I mentioned, unless something changes. I met with the ambassador from UK yesterday to talk a little bit about what happened, what Russia did within their country just in the last few days. And, I told him that the interesting thing about all this is the Europeans, more than anyone else, want to keep the deal in place, and yet there's been difficulties in coming together on this framework to really deal with the sunset provisions. So
And that's when the Iran deal expires, essentially, at the end of a decade.
That's correct.
So you had been working very closely with Rex Tillerson to try to tighten the deal and protect it from the president tearing it up. Why haven't you been able to do that?
Well, the only way we're going to pass domestic, we could pass some domestic sunset language and deal with ballistic missiles and deal with testing, okay? We could do that, but we can only do that if the Democrats believe that the Europeans are in agreement with that. So we've really put the onus back on the administration. It's up to them diplomatically to bring them along and make that happen. And until it does, there's no way we're going to pass legislation
And now
here.
there's no Secretary of State to do that.
Well, and I think, of course, I haven't sat down with Pompeo yet. I hope to do so I know we will in the next few days. We had a very nice conversation earlier this week. But I think Pompeo's sense is that we should move away from the deal also. So he will bring a very different point of view based on what I've been told. I haven't had that conversation with him. But I think he'll bring a very different point of view than Tillerson has brought to this, and Mattis, I might add.
Well, Tillerson and Mattis have been advising the president it's better to stick with this deal and this agreement with international allies rather than blow it up. Now you have this timeline in May where you could see the U.S. pulling out of a nuclear deal with Iran at the same time it's starting to negotiate with North Korea about its nuclear program. Do you think it makes things harder to get anywhere with North Korea?
I don't. I mean, I know people...
You don't think they're related?
I don't. Look, I have used that argument, okay? But at the end of the day, I think this whole situation with North Korea and the way that it's shaping up right now, as I mentioned, is somewhat unorthodox. And I think you're dealing with a leader there that probably doesn't think the same way that other countries and their leadership might. So I'm not sure that it's going to end up having a detrimental effect.
Do you think the president should sit down with Kim Jong-un?
I think it's fine. Look, it's going to happen.
You do believe that meeting's going to happen?
I think ultimately it happens. I do. And I think that that's the way the president likes to deal with things. And I think that what you're going to see is people who have a lot of institutional knowledge prepping for the meeting. You've already seen the administration sort of move away from an instant meeting. They've said that, they don't know exactly when it's going to occur. And
So
I think
maybe not May, which is when the
Well, I
South
think you're
Koreans-
seeing that happen because the realities of what you have to do in preparation to make sure that it's successful. It takes a while for that to occur. And typically you would have some of the experts that deal with nuclear issues discussing some of these things in advance together. We do have back channels ourselves, by the way, to North Korea, and we have our ways of setting things like that up in an appropriate manner.
And do you think Mike Pompeo is currently at the CIA, but will ultimately face confirmation ahead of your committee to become Secretary of State? Is he the right person to be leading that diplomacy? I mean, is he already laying some of this groundwork?
I think you saw, I think he became aware of his situation over the weekend, and you saw where he
was getting this job.
Yeah. And I think you saw where he had already briefed himself up on North Korea a little bit more fully than he otherwise would have probably. Look, at the end of the day, you want a Secretary of State, I think, who gives the president the full collage of thought processes that one can go down and gives him an opportunity to look at multiple options. But I think also, look, there's no question that the Secretary Tillerson and the president had differing viewpoints. You take the Paris Accord, the Iran deal, you could name many others. And there was, as I mentioned, a difference in style that also created a rub. It's my sense that Pompeo is much more aligned with the president. And so I think one of the questions he'll get, during the hearing process is just ensuring that he's going to be giving honest assessments and that full range of options to the president as decisions are being made. My sense is, though, they will get along. They will move much more fully together as they move down the path on foreign policy.
Do you object to the idea of having Mike Pompeo in that role as acting Secretary of State before he gets confirmed by your committee? There's concern that you need someone in that job as soon as possible.
Well, look, we're going to have hearings in April. John Sullivan's over there now, and I think he's a very competent person. He briefed us yesterday on what's happening. The Deputy Secretary. Yeah, the Deputy Secretary. He briefed us yesterday on what's happening in Yemen. And so, look, hopefully we'll move through in April. My Democratic counterparts, hopefully, will be in a situation where they'd rather see a Secretary of State in place than not in place. And hopefully we can get, assuming, again, he passes muster in the committee, hopefully he can be confirmed very quickly.
Do you expect to have a new Secretary of State by May?
Look, it's, Margaret, as you know, we're moving into the sort of the election season, and things are beginning to feel slightly more partisan. I hope that's the case, but we'll see.
Rand Paul says he's going to block the nomination.
Well, we have 21 members, and so it takes 11, and we have one member who said they would oppose him. There were 2 Democrats who voted for Pompeo on the floor who are members of the committee for CIA.
Have you spoken with Rex Tillerson since he was fired?
I had a long conversation with him, yes.
How is he doing?
Look, you and I talked a little bit before he came on, and, Rex had a distinguished career. The CEO of Exxon was with the same company his entire career, rose to the top, highly respected. I think that he's really proud of the fact he was able to serve his country for 14 months. I think that was something that was important to him to be able to do so. It's obviously been rough and tumble. His family has watched back in Texas as many things have occurred that were very different than when he was at Exxon. But I think he's doing fine. I think he knows he's laid the groundwork for North Korea. I know he feels like he's moved things along in a good way. He wants to have a very good transition with Pompeo. He's a class act in that regard. You were, I think, at the 2 o'clock briefing he gave the other day to let people know what was happening and what he planned to do in transition. So I think he's at peace. I think he obviously wanted to stay a year. He moved beyond that. I think he was planning to be here this entire year also to make it 2. But look, I think he feels like he served his country well and knows that the president needs to have his own Secretary of State, or one that he more jihaws fully with.
You said before that you thought that Tillerson was one of the people helping to separate the country from chaos, and that you'd be embarrassed if he left office. Do you feel that way?
Well,
now?
that was, at that particular period of time, you have to, Margaret, I talk constantly with Tillerson, and I talk constantly with the president, and I was aware of sort of what was happening at that time, and I did not think he would be leaving at that time, and I was right.
This was his diplomatic strategy. He wanted to talk to North Korea.
Yeah. So I do think one of the things that has occurred with Tillerson is that he and Mattis have had an incredible relationship that is most unusual for this city, where the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense went in always on the same page on policy issues. That's been a rare thing, and Tillerson spent a lot of time cultivating that. And so when I made that comment, it was to say that these 2 guys go in together. They go in locking arms, and they have been, in my opinion, a great team.
Are you concerned that that sort of moderating voice won't be in the room now? That's what Rex Tillerson has done on many of these issues.
Well, you still have, you've got Kelly as Chief of Staff, and I think the 3 of them worked very well together. You've got McMaster at NSC. You've got, of course, Mattis will continue on. And look, Pompeo, I don't know enough about him to judge whether he will be that voice, but the people who have worked closely with him say very good things about him. So I'll make my own assessment soon, but I have to say we've had the best national security team that I can remember in the 11 years that I've been here. And hopefully Pompeo, and there's been many editorials by people who know him over the last very short amount of time, believe he's going to be very good, so we'll see.
Does it concern you, though, that the president seems recently to be making staffing choices based more on ideology and personal beliefs?
Look, when the president called from Air Force One the other day to let me know what was happening with Rex, as I said to him, every cabinet member serves at his pleasure. He should have people that he feels he has confidence in. And, I don't think, I think President Obama probably had people around him that were in, even though he and John Kerry obviously disagreed on many, many things, and I point that out to people, that certainly was not a perfect relationship either. I think John wants people to know that they differed, okay, and pointed it out many times afterward. So look, I think presidents, generally speaking, try to get people together that can work effectively as a team. I will say that, and I've watched this, and I've been on the speakerphone during these debates, okay, where the president will call. He'll have his team of people around him in the Oval Office, and we'll be debating an issue. And I do think he likes to hear diverse opinions. But once a decision is made, I think he likes to see it move along quickly, and I think that was one of the frustrations he may have had with Secretary Tillerson.
Do you expect more sanctions on Russia as Congress has called for?
I do. We had as you and I mentioned before, we had a meeting in the SCIF where we have classified briefings, and Secretary Mnuchin walked through the various things they're doing relative to the oligarchs. That's the next piece that's going to roll out and may roll out very, very soon. But it takes a lot of work, and they've got sanctions that are taking place on North Korea. They've got sanctions that are occurring other places. I don't get the feeling that there's any slow walking taking place, and I think we're going to see several more rounds of sanctions occurring.
I want to ask you quickly about your own career. You've decided to retire, but you seemed to waver from that a few weeks ago. Did you seriously consider staying here in Washington?
In December, I had a number of senators. I made a decision in September that, when I ran in Tennessee, I told people I couldn't imagine serving more than 2 terms. I think it was the right decision for me. I think some of us come up here on a sort of a missional type of service. Some people, do it in a different way. For me, that was the right way. But in December, I had, numbers of senators coming up and talking to me about reconsidering. Some because of foreign policy experience, some just for pure politics, maintaining the seat. I went to Davos for the economic forum representing our country, and had numbers of people around the world doing the same thing, and so I spent about 2.5 weeks thinking about it, and felt that I made the right decision in September. So,
but that moment in January, you did rethink
staying. It was actually, I think, in February, but for a couple of weeks, I'd hoped to do it privately. Nothing around here happens privately, unfortunately, but I spent a couple of weeks thinking about it, and it was very therapeutic, and that I just felt that the decision I made in September was the right one. So,
do you think the party's doing enough to keep your seat in Republican hands?
Oh, I'm not much of a politician.
You're not much of a politician?
I'm not much of a politician. No.
So you're a pretty high-ranking senator here.
Well, that has occurred, and I've certainly cherished my role as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. But I'm not much of a politician.
But that's not enough for you to say, I got to stay for the party, just to hold the seat.
Again, it used to be around, in our country that people cherished the fact that people would run for 2 terms and leave, right? It was interesting when I announced that I was going to actually do what I said I was going to do while I campaigned. I got no credit for it. People were saying, well, you should stay. You should stay. What are you doing leaving? I've only got 2 years left if I were to stay as chairman of the committee. We have term limits on our side of the aisle as it relates to chairmanships. I would be the next person in banking, but I just felt like that 2 terms was the right amount of time. So,
What's next for you?
I have no idea. You know, there's a little anxiety. I've been working since I was 13. I know I'm going to do something else. I came from business, and we'll see. I want to continue to play a constructive role. Got a lot of energy, and I want to figure out a way to make a difference in another sphere.
But we won't see you around here anymore.
You won't see me around here. I don't think I'll be up here. You certainly will not see me doing any kind of government relations work or anything like that, but you know, we'll see what happens.